Okay, so now we're recording this call. Welcome to Professional Note Appraisal, and this is the first time that I've taught this, even though I've been doing this particular service for about 3 to 4 years now. And for any of you that don't know me very well, I started in the note business, learning the note business back in the 90s when I still had a full-time nursing job, but I always wanted a way out. You know, I knew I wasn't going to want to work for somebody else for the rest of my life. You know, some years when you're self-employed, you wish you were it would be easier to be working for someone else. But, you know, sometimes you get to that point where you just really want something different. And so I started studying about it, and through the years of seminars and courses and experience, and then doing lots of cold calling in the early part of this decade in regards to real estate, I just started to notice a pattern that blended my passion for the note business with real estate, which led me to becoming an owner financing consultant. But one of the many things that you can do with knowledge of the note business, and I know, you know, we have some people who are very brand new and some people who have experience with notes. The thing is, the note business per se, in some years can be good and in some years can be bad. Just like investing in real estate, some years can be good, some years can be bad. But with that knowledge, you can always leverage it to do something, and that's what I absolutely love about the note business. It's once you have the knowledge, and you can do that. I like to call it the dance between property and paper, because once you understand real estate and notes, which are really just two sides of the same coin, then you see how liquid they are. Just like water can either be ice or steam based on, you know, what the pressures are. Paper can turn into property, and property can turn into paper. And you can buy property using owner financing. You can sell property using owner financing. You can buy notes. You can sell notes. You can broker property. You can broker notes. You can make consulting income. You can make referral fees. You can, and then you can do this sort of little niche that not a lot of people actually pull off, but it's the whole note appraisal model that will help you just make a little bit of money while you're sort of backdoor marketing yourself as a note buyer. In my mind, everything that I do, from appraising notes to being an owner financing consultant, what I'm really doing is positioning myself to set up a pipeline of paper that I can actually buy. One of the problems and the issues these days in the note business, as we know it, is that there's a lot of paper, but a lot of it just isn't worth it's not worth a thing. You might as well just burn it up. And so the biggest problem that we have is that people they're using owner financing to move properties. You know, lots of investors are buying properties with cash and then selling with owner financing. That's great. But people, if they don't know what they're doing, they're creating paper that's just not worth anything. And so that's my whole mission in one aspect. And when we add note appraisal, see, now attorneys, and this is kind of an interesting note to people who are listening.
Yes.
Okay, these days, even attorneys that never cared about my message, this is true on realtors, attorneys, they never cared about notes or owner financing back in the early few years ago when I was really hot on the trail and developing my little niche. They just didn't care about it because it wasn't relevant. Now I get attorneys. In fact, it was so funny. In 1 2-week period, I had 3 attorneys download my book that Seller Financing on Steroids, that I have on my website, and all 3 of them called me for advice. So what we have here is a situation where, because sellers are in a situation of using owner financing and more paper is created, we have attorneys that then have to do something to help their clients. They have to educate themselves, because so many attorneys don't even know anything about promissory notes. It's kind of odd to think of that. In fact, I talked to there was a note that I came across, this was probably a year or two ago, and it was a guy who'd been a probate attorney for 20 years, and this was the very first time he had a $500,000 note in front of him, and it was the very first time that he'd ever seen one in 20 years. And so he had no idea about the whole note, the whole note business. And so that in that particular case, he was just selling the note for his client, but I ended up doing a lot of education and then pitching my services. Hey, if you ever need to just know what a note is worth, then I also have this other service. But the point is, yeah, I can make a little bit of money consulting and a little bit of money appraising notes, but what I'm doing is very securely positioning myself in the mind of that professional that I'm in the note business. So it's not necessarily about, oh, I'm going to make a ton of money with these little services. No, it's always great. Every penny that comes in, I kiss it and before it goes in the bank, like thank you. But really the point is for me, and I think a lot of people, is just to say, how can I set myself up so that 5 years from now I kind of have an effortless stream of decent paper coming my way? Because right now it can be a tough struggle where you might quote 10 different notes and 2 of them are good and only 1 of them accepts, because they have unrealistic expectations. So that's just sort of a history of of a way where I've come from and a way for me to think of it. So what I want to do, you get the good paper, it can be hard to get a yes. And so what I find is the better I can position myself, or if I can get what I really love business-to-business models for doing the note business. Like B2B would be me to realtors, me to attorneys, me to CPAs, me to financial planners, because once I get a referral from those people, it's a warm lead, so I have a much better chance of actually having the note holder work with me because I've been referred by someone important, in their lives generally. And so this is doing note appraisals really helps you on that regard as well, because in fact I just as a side note, and this is something I'll probably go into a whole section of probably more than 1 week's training on, but just creating a brand of who you are. I had a lady call me, she's in Florida, and she has a note to sell, and she said, it's been since 2003, so it's good. It's got 7 years of seasoning on it, and she said it sounds like she set it up well. She's getting me the documents tomorrow morning. But here's what happened. She goes, I just came across the idea that I learned that I could sell my note, but then I went on the internet and I wanted to find out about it because I heard about the idea, but I didn't know really who to trust. But then I read everything on your website and I saw your videos, and I just, I really like you and I trust you, and I just want to do business with you. And so it's not just about having a template site. It's about positioning yourself as someone who stands out a little bit, either personality-wise or in the services that you can offer, your integrity, your professionalism, all sorts of things. So anyway, getting back to note appraisals, doing note appraisals really assumes that you have a basic grasp of the note business. And because what we have done in these appraisals, if you had a chance to look over them, is we've incorporated the basic principles of what makes notes valuable into the document themselves, so that if anyone looking at it, like an IRS agent or an attorney or a CPA or anything, if they're trying to figure out how you made a valuation of that note, they have an idea of the factors involved. If I had $100 to give you, but would you rather have $50 today or $100 30 years from now?
50 today.
Yeah, exactly. Why? Because of buying power. How much based on even a modest 5 to 7% inflation, which we'll probably have a lot more of because of quantitative easing and other fancy terms called printing money and devaluing it. But even just with a 5%, probably in 30 years, that $100, if we got it today, would only buy us about $18 worth of stuff or $15 worth of stuff right now. So $50 today is worth a lot. So when you have a long term, the longer the term, the bigger the discount on the note, because the investor is not going to get that money for a really long time, and by the time he does, it's not going to buy very much. So the term, protective equity, that is, how do we get protective equity in a note? What creates protective equity?
Balloon payment?
Pardon?
Would it be a balloon payment?
Yeah, that's right. It's the down payment when the note is first made, right? So the down payment creates instant hard equity. Okay, and then other equity happens after long periods of time with appreciation. So, like if your note is, if you have a $100,000 property and you took a $10,000 down payment, then you have $10,000 of instant equity. But, you know, 10 years later, if that property is worth $150,000, now that note is almost a 50% loan to value instead of 90% loan to value, right? Because the property has appreciated. But most people like to see, even if the note is like this one I was telling you in Florida, even if it was 10 years, had 7 years of seasoning, they still want to see that in the beginning someone put a nice healthy down payment. Why?
It shows a strong credit person.
Yeah, because they have a lot of skin in the game.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, so first page, definitely notes secured by the collateral, and usually secured notes are the easiest thing to evaluate because you can get real quotes and real numbers on it. So I always put that. I always put for who it was for, and in this case, it's an attorney firm. I always put the date of when it was. Now you would think, well, obviously, isn't it the date that you do the appraisal? Not necessarily. Sometimes they say, for tax purposes, we want to know, as in this one, April 15th, 2007, we want to know if for tax purposes, what the note was worth at that time. And hopefully it wasn't too long ago, because that gets into a little bit of trouble of figuring out exactly, you know, what it was worth. But sometimes if you're doing it for a note holder, then they want to know what is it worth today. But sometimes they want to know, you know, for taxes, or at the time somebody died, they're doing an estate planning sort of thing, you know, for estate taxes. Then obviously your name there. So then page 2 is pretty self-explanatory. In accordance with your request, I've appraised the note in deed of trust and encumbering this property. And I always put the APN number because you'd be surprised how many times there can be errors with that. So here we are, the purpose of the appraisal, because you know, like how in real estate, if they always want to know what's the purpose. Is it for a new purchase? Is it for a refinance? You know, is it a BPO, you know, for like an asset manager, things like that. So I always just put that in because it looks really, you know, official. And then I put the balance of the note there. And then this is the page where, even though I haven't explained it, you know, they can see right in the beginning, right, what the note is worth, what I'm saying the note is worth, you know, right there. And then the rest of the report explains why. Now, in the other, I provided this text below. The value reflects current market conditions, which were similar to those of April 15th, 2007. Now, do you have any ideas? What would I do if, let's say, I didn't know exactly what the market was doing, like if it was, let's say, 9 months ago? I didn't. What if I thought the market, can you guys think of any ideas of what I could do if I didn't know, well, what was the market doing? Okay, applicable federal rates, AFR rulings, let's see if we have it. So applicable federal rates kind of give, like, okay, the basic interest rates of the price of money at any given time shows you what basically interest rates were doing. So what I did when I had to go back several months is I just compared the short-term and long-term applicable federal rates, and if they were pretty close, then I just said, okay, I would just say this, it's about the same as before. Does that make sense? Like if interest rates were pretty similar, then note buying generally is going to be pretty similar. Does that make sense? Because if interest rates are high, then discounts are what? Smaller or bigger? When interest rates are high, are discounts on notes bigger or smaller?
I don't know.
Not sure.
Yeah, they're bigger because if I can go at a CD at a bank and get 5%, then I'm going to want like 12 to 15% on my money if I'm going to go to the trouble of buying a note. But if interest rates are low, then I'm happy with making 8 or 9% on my money. Like if I can only get 1% in a CD at the bank, then I'm willing to work a little harder just to get 8 or 9%. So basically what you can do, and this is maybe a little too advanced right at this minute, but I just want to show you how you can get a feel for interest rates. And if these AFR rates are similar from the time that you're being asked to appraise a note, then you can pretty much assume that that you can take today's value and extrapolate it to back then.
Okay.
It's not going to be an exact science, but I'm just giving you an idea of what you can do if you're not giving the value of a note in today's version, so that you will know that, yeah, the market was a little stronger then, or I know it's the same a few months ago, or I know it was a lot weaker back then. So you'll have an idea of whether to go up or down. And I just wanted to show you that, and I want to go back to our, where am I? Right?
Yes.
Okay. So what I want you to, this part right here is that you need to have disclaimers, because I always ask the attorneys, is there any chance that this is going to be a high profile kind of a thing? And because I don't plan on coming in and testifying and defending this whole thing. And usually they don't need anything close to that. They just need an idea of the value of the note, because the value of the note is never the balance, like almost never. Because even if I have a note that's at 12%, and I go, well, that's fine, I'll buy that note, but I won't buy it at par, because what if that note pays off next month? I've spent money, I've spent appraisals, I've spent, there's been title, there's been closing fees, there's been recording fees, and I'll lose money if that note pays off like tomorrow after I just bought it. So I'm always going to want enough of a discount that even in early payoff, it was still worth my time to do the whole thing. Does that make sense? So when you're marketing to people, they go, well, I know what the value of the note is. It's the balance is $102,031. I said, no, that's not at all what the value of the note is. And that's the biggest hurdle that you need to get across to people. And after we look at this report, I'm going to show you a super simple brochure that I put together that you could easily do a lot better than this. I put together this years ago. It's almost embarrassing to look at it now, but it was enough to just get the message out there. But so what you need to do is kind of cover yourself, though. You want to make sure that your wording says, look, I'm not telling you exactly, but interest rates are similar, but institutional buyers and their programs are subject to variation from year to year. In fact, right now, it's month to month. And investors are needing deeper discounts in general. So then there's some other standard language in there that's just saying this is not a distressed sale, it's an arm's length transaction. And then usually when you're doing an appraisal, you will not have all the documents that you would have if you were actually buying. They go, this is all we could come up with, just fill in the blanks. You know what I mean? We don't know credit scores. We're not going to ask for credit scores. We don't have a payment history. Just assume this and assume that, you know. So usually you're filling in a lot of blanks with this thing, but you don't need to get freaked out about it. You just need to cover yourself. Due to the lack of full documentation available for this note or this valuation, many assumptions were made which naturally err on the side of minimizing the discount. It is not uncommon for complete due diligence to reveal weaknesses that result in a deeper discount at the close of escrow. The above market valuation should be considered an optimistic one, as full documentation could easily result in a deeper discount. I mean, that's easy. Even when you're working on a note, you'll have everything line up perfect, and then the appraisal won't come in, or the payer's credit score is like 590 or something. And so that could ruin everything. Or they had 2 30-day lates, something like that. Okay? Then the appraisal report, we have the trustor, that's the person who's paying on it, and I list all of these things. Now, I get these off of title profile reports. You guys know what I'm talking about? If you've been in real estate, you know you have title, right? You can get profiles and you can get the basic info, and there's tons of stuff online for data, right?
Yes.
So I always pull that first. I pull it as if I'm an investor, like I'm going to buy and make a purchase on that property, because I want to have all that info to put in my report. So that's what you're going to do, is you're going to pull a profile or however you get that information. And then we just say what it is, who the trustee is, what type of property, because as you guys know, just as there's many different ways for thinking about property based upon whether it's residential or commercial, the notes really mirror all of that. Okay, so if you already know how to evaluate a commercial property, then you already know basically what someone's going to need to know to buy the note against that property. So that's how similar it all is. People think it's a little bit mysterious, but it's not, because the reason the note buyer has to know almost more than if you were buying the property, because the note buyer's going, I may end up with this property. So when someone's buying a note, usually they're hoping that they just get their payments on time, but they're always looking at it as if they might end up owning the property. Okay, so have any of you bought commercial property?
No.
Yes.
Yeah? Okay, so then you know there's a lot more to it than just, the comps in the neighborhood on a single family. Okay, I always describe the collateral, improvements, 28s, anyway. I put as much as I can there. I get that from the title report. Then here's where I kind of do a bullseye of what this note looks like, and this is sort of similar to what I prepare when I get someone who says I have a note to sell. I don't even work on it unless they'll get me a copy of the note. That's just an aside. But then before I even evaluate too much, I just go through and I fill this out. Okay, what's the credit score? Usually, I don't know, so we just put unknown. And usually when you're doing appraisals for other people, they'll always say they don't know, because rarely have they recently run credit, or they might even be reticent to run credit for some reason. They don't want the payers to know that they're selling or whatever. The value of the collateral, and then you put down how you're determining that. In this case, the sales price was in 2001 for $150,000. I don't know if you could see this right here. Can you see my pointer?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So then I just go, well, that we can assume some appreciation. That was as of 2007. Now I would go, well, it's probably dropped down again. But you got to figure why, and you have to know that most note buyers, they will assume that the value of the property is mostly what the person sold it for, unless it's been a really, really long time. But now, these days, anything bought in the height of the market, everyone assumes that it's worth less than that now. But in general, like if you say, oh, well, they sold this property 10 months ago, it was worth $100,000, but they sold it for $80,000. So this $70,000 note is 70 LTV. No, they won't say that. It's whatever the property was sold for, because if it was worth $100,000, you should have sold it for $100,000. So you just have to know that the value is going to be considered mainly what it sold for, and in some rare instances like this, some appreciation is warranted. But what I'm trying to show you is that it's not really so scientific. There's a bit of an art to it too, and that's why you're getting paid for understanding the basic principles that either put upward pressure or downward pressure on the price of a note.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
If you were doing this today and the value is considerably less than what they paid for it, would you put in the section value determined by, would you say sales price minus depreciation? If you were doing like a family?
Sales price minus depreciation?
Right,
well,
if somebody's upside down on a property.
Yeah. This is like, just show your thinking. You see what I'm saying? So if you said, look, I looked it up on Zillow, or I did a BPO, see attached, or something like that.
Okay.
You know, if you have access to that, you can do it. So this, I would just put however I came up with the value, and if you need to have backup, you can. But most people would say in this situation, a little bit of appreciation is warranted. But we can't tell, because usually they don't want to pay for an appraisal. They don't want to pay for a property appraisal to get the note appraised. So you usually have to be comfortable with just some guesswork here. I put the loan to value. I put the date the note was created. The date the note's created is usually at the top of every note. And then the date that interest begins isn't necessarily that same date. You'll find it usually in the first or second paragraph of the note. Sales price, down payment, and how much of a down payment that was. $18,000 on a $150,000 purchase was a 12% down payment. That left me with the face value of $132,000. The interest rate was 9%. It was amortized over 30 years, 360. It was due in 60. That means we have a 5-year balloon, right? I put the position of the note, and just as an aside, if it's not in first position, is it worth anything?